Hello and welcome to our IL community workshop focused on how to move out of the US. My name is Jen Stevens. I'm the executive editor of International Living and your host. The topic of moving overseas, I think, has never been more relevant than it is today. For starters, the upcoming US election is approaching, and more Americans than usual seem to be feeling the urgency to take action. They are contemplating a move abroad driven by factors that include political uncertainty, certainly, but also financial considerations, a desire for adventure and for a better quality of life. And in fact, it has never been easier to go abroad than it is today. So we are going to explore these motivations and provide you with some insights and practical advice. We will hear first from experts who can guide you on how to navigate this significant life change. And then we will hear from some expats who have already made the leap. Plus, we will be answering your questions live, so stay tuned and please join the conversation. Before we dive in, I want to share some exciting news. We have this workshop as part of the launch of our new community forum. This is an interactive forum that connects you with fellow International Living members and expats and experts. It is a space where you can help each other to travel better and discover new places, to live more affordably and ultimately enjoy the world more. And as a member of International Living, you are able to ask questions in workshops like this one. So if you have not yet become a member of IL, now is a perfect time to do that. So you can get exclusive access to this content and expert advice, and you can connect through our community forum when you are a member. So you can click on the description below to subscribe today and start exploring your overseas options with us. So with all that said, let's get started. In the first section of today's workshop, we will hear from some seasoned experts who will share some practical advice about how you can find the place that's right for you and put a go abroad plan in place, from analyzing the current US situation to discussing top destinations, financial considerations, visa options. Our experts are going to get you started on your journey. So let's meet our guests here. We have Ted Baumann, who is International Living's global diversification expert, our second passport guru. Hi, Ted.
Hey, how are you?
Well, thanks for joining me. And we have Suzan Haskins, who's IL's senior lifestyle editor. Hi, Suzan.
Hi there. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thank you both for joining me. I wanted to start by discussing just quickly some findings that I thought were interesting from a recent survey we did of International Living members. According to the survey, 65% of members now say that the current political environment has prompted them to move up their timelines for relocating overseas. And in addition, 78% said that they believe that ensuring the well-being of retirees should be a top priority for future US policy, which indicates a deep-seated concern, I think, about the stability of their future domestically. So people are feeling some uncertainty about that future, and that's creating a greater sense of urgency for folks who want to get a go abroad plan in place. So Ted, let me start with you. Though you moved to South Africa when you were in your late teens, you recently spent about 15 or so years back in the United States, where you are from originally, and now you have returned to South Africa. Your background is as an economist. Would you mind giving us a snapshot of where you think the US is today, and maybe share some insights about how that influenced your decision to go abroad again?
Sure, Jen. Thanks again for having me. Well, yeah, look, I mean, basically, I think the key thing is it's not so much, either the two political parties or, the issues themselves are not so much the issue. It's the problem that we can't decide. We can't decide on critical things. And when I consult with people who come to me as part of my portfolio here at International Living, people will say to me, well, I have doctors will say to me, I've been in healthcare in the United States for most of my life, and I know what's wrong, and everybody knows what's wrong, but nothing ever happens. And I think the biggest problem is that there are issues that really go to the heart of what it means to be able to live a decent retirement, for example, that could be addressed, but are not being addressed because of the way that politics has evolved in the States, where you just can't deal with the stuff. There's too much else going on. It includes healthcare, it includes retirement, the funding of the retirement system. It includes the way that the corporate sector interacts with government and whether or not the issues that are important to ordinary citizens are the most important issue that politicians pay attention to. And I think for me, when I left the States originally as a very young man in the 1980s, there was another time of great change. I mean, it was the Reagan administration had just come to power, and there was a lot of mourning in America, I think is what Ronnie said about it back then. And I think one of the things that was different when I came back in 2008 was that instead of this sense of possibility for the future, there was this sense of real kind of negativity. It's like a zero-sum game, right? That it's either us or it's them. And that was in the context of the Obama's campaign. And really things have kind of gone downhill from there. I'd like to say that they haven't, but they have. And again, it's not about the particular issues. It's not about who's right, who's wrong. It's just that to have a decent life as a citizen of a country or a resident of a country, the government has to be focused on what makes life good or not. And this kind of politics doesn't address that. And that's kind of what motivated my family and I, and also the fact, and let's be honest, there are pull factors. I live in Cape Town, which is arguably the most beautiful city in the world, and and so having been overseas once, it was like I did that once. Why am I here? Let me do that again. I'll have fun. I'll enjoy life. It's not perfect down here, I can tell you. We're headed for an election too in about a week's time down here, and it's going to be a doozy. But I felt like, well, at least people are focused on the future, and they're focused on making things work, and that was really what attracted me. And in my work, when I look at European countries in particular, for all the issues that they have, they've sorted out these things. They've sorted out how you should deal with retirement, how you should deal with healthcare, those kinds of things. Obviously, there are ongoing issues, but they have systems that work, and that's what Americans are looking for. And the people I speak to in my work tell me the same thing. They want to go somewhere that works because that's what's important to them at this stage in life.
Suzan, picking up on that idea, you've lived in a bunch of different communities across several countries in the last couple decades. What are some practical steps that people can take to begin to narrow down and sort of home in on the places overseas that would make the most sense for them?
Well, I think it's important at this stage to really consider what you want out of your next phase of life. And I call it profiling yourself, to really think about, I think we all want better weather. We all want a place that's more affordable in our retirement. We want good health care. And there are a myriad of countries and communities where you can find that. But I think you have to really consider what's most important to you. Is it being close to your friends and family back home so that you can easily go back and visit, or in case of an emergency, be able to fly back quickly? Prioritize those things that you want, and then start drilling down from there to find the place that makes sense for you, but also what Ted was talking about makes you happy. I mean, we only have a limited amount of time left when we get to a certain stage of life, and happiness is key. So, think of all those needs and wants, but really think about what personally appeals to you. And I think that's how you decide where you're going to focus. And from then, there are a lot of steps that you can take. And I think we'll probably drill into some of those here in this conversation.
Yeah, what are some common mistakes that people make when they are choosing a new home? You talk about profiling yourself, but I know you and Dan even have sort of had some false starts over the years when you thought you wanted one thing and wanted another. What are some of the mistakes that you wouldn't make again, or you see people make?
And I don't see them as mistakes necessarily, and I don't think that you should ever consider anything to be a mistake, because if you go somewhere, for instance, and you find out it's not really for you, you've had a great experience, I hope, and you will be able to use that experience to move forward and find the place that's right for you. from my own perspective, having lived all of my adult life in Nebraska and the Midwest, where we were landlocked. Dan and I were scuba divers, and we thought, oh, we want to live at the beach. We want to go diving and be at the beach. And then when we got to the beach and we lived, very close to the beach where we could see the water every day, and we realized that that wasn't really for us. We don't like heat and humidity and all of those things that come with living at the beach. We decided that we were really people who needed, it doesn't necessarily need to be a city, but we do like city life or neighborhood life. So when we lived in a smaller community or a neighborhood within a smaller community where we could walk everywhere, we could meet our neighbors on the street, the climate was temperate, we were much happier. So, I think there are some challenges that you encounter as you go about this, but it's all a learning experience. And hopefully, with some of the things that IL is writing and some of the experiences that I know we all share with you, you can learn from our, not mistakes, but the challenges that we've encountered.
Your learnings.
Yeah, it's all a learning experience.
How important is it for people to spend time in a potential new location before they make a move? And what should people look for during their visits? Because there are definitely people I see making comments in our community site and so on, like, I've never been there, I'm just moving there. And that just seems nuts to me. But talk a little bit about that. Like, how important is it that you test drive a place?
I've seen people have experiences on both sides of that equation. I know people who, and particularly people who have, who are economically challenged, I'll say, who have said, you know what, I need to get out of here and I don't have the money to travel around and to spend time in so many different places. So I'm going to pick one place and I'm going to go there. And I've seen that happen, and I've seen it be super successful, because they did a lot of research beforehand and they zeroed down the places that they want to go, not just the country, but the community. I think that's really important to keep in mind. And then I've seen people who have taken a year and traveled from one country and community to another, seeing what makes the most sense for them. But to get back to your question, if you have, excuse me, the means and the time to be able to go somewhere and spend as much time as you can on the ground, that is the very best use of your resources. I mean, you really want to find out how that community appeals to you, not only financially, but from a healthcare standpoint, from a cultural standpoint, from an expat standpoint, from a tax standpoint, all of those things that we talk about. So the more time that you can spend in one place, getting to know that place to see if it's the right fit for you, the better off I think you'll be.
Okay. All right. One last question for you, and I'm going to go to Ted here, but in your experience, what are some of the biggest surprises that people encounter when they move abroad? And they might be good surprises, they might be bad surprises, but what are people not ready for, I guess?
Well, there are a couple of things, I think, and it's all kind of those things that I mentioned before. Sometimes it's the culture of the place that you weren't expecting, how it would be so different from where you're coming from. For instance, if they speak a different language and you don't have a good grasp of that language or can't seem to pick it up very easily, that can be very difficult. So you need to have a network around you. It's nice to have people who are bilingual or other expats to call on in that case. Some other challenges are that sometimes places are oversold, especially if you are part of some expat groups on Facebook or other social media. You might think that this place is nirvana, and you get there and you find out that it's not, or that you were expecting the cost of living to be very, very low, and it's not so low, or you forgot some things that you maybe needed to add into your budget, like those trips back home, or health insurance, or something like that, taxes. So I think you want to do, again, an overabundance of research to find out everything you can about the place that you're going to go, and that will help you so much when you get there. So there are lots of little things, but there are so many great things about moving overseas and living in a different community and all of the adventure of that, and better health care for the most part. I mean, we have great health care in the United States, but it's a different kind of health care overseas, and it's certainly going to be more affordable. So there are lots of really wonderful things about it. So I would say don't let the challenges become insurmountable, because they say there's a honeymoon phase where you get to a place and you go, and this has happened to Dan and I, especially happened to us on our first move overseas, where we went, oh my goodness, what have we done? And then after a while you go, well, I don't know what we did, but it's pretty wonderful. So, it's all, again, a learning curve, an experiential curve, and it really is a wonderful thing to contemplate and do.
Thank you. Ted, I want to go back to you. We maybe get a little bit more technical here. Can broad strokes, when you're going to go live in a place, you need to be able to do it legally. So you need to have a visa. You need to be have some documentation that allows you to stay in a place. Can you talk a little bit about what sort of some common visa options are, just so that people have a sense for the lay of the land?
Sure, sure. Well, look, for a long time, and if you look in the press, and the migration press, I call it, it's been all about the golden visa, right? And the golden visa is basically anything that where you make a major investment in a country, they give you a residence permit in return. And honestly, I believe it's just been overdone in the press. You go to websites, it's all they talk about, and it's not all that's there. There's so many other opportunities, but in a nutshell, you've really got four basic options. One is if you can find a place that will give you a residence permit based on investment, whether it's in a house or government bonds or some sort of a fund or something like that, then that's one way to do it. That's through investment. And that's roughly speaking what a golden visa is. Doesn't have to be a house, it can be something else. It's through investment. The second thing is if you have enough resources, passive income to live in a place, what people call independent means visas or retirement visas, although most of them don't distinguish between retirees and anybody else who has enough money. So if you've got a trust fund and you're 25, you can pick up a retirement visa.
Go in on that kind of visa. Gotcha.
Exactly. And then there are the digital nomad visas, which are really designed for people like me, for example, who can work anywhere in the world as long as they have an internet connection. And those are the big categories today. And I think there's a big shift away from the investment side of things, away from the buying the house and getting the permit, towards the independent means and digital nomad visas. And the reason for that is simply because countries have found that the housing investment thing doesn't really pay off all that well from their perspective. It's like money comes into the country, but then that's it, right? Then the house is off the market. So where's the other contribution coming from this person, this immigrant? On the other hand, if you're retired or have independent means, you're spending money every day, right? You're going to the shops, you're spending money, you're creating jobs. They love that. And if you look around the world, both in Europe and in the Western Hemisphere, and increasingly in parts of Asia, it's really not difficult to get one of these visas. You just have to be able to show that you have enough regular, steady income to be able to qualify for the visa. And it's just common sense. If you have enough money to live comfortably, if you can afford a place to live, if you have, usually some subsidiary supplemental healthcare policy, usually very cheap, then you're welcome. And there's no problem. The digital nomad visas are a little bit more complicated in the sense that they usually have higher income requirements, but not that much higher. And for people who are young and in working years, it's an ideal thing. Then there is a whole nother branch, and that's kind of part of what I do at IL is getting citizenship through things like ancestral citizenship and so on. And if you have, like so many millions of Americans do, connections to countries in Europe or other parts of the world as well, where you have ancestors, that's another way that you can do it. And every day I get emails from people saying, my great aunt so and so was born in Hungary and 18 whatever, and can I get a citizenship? And we do the work, and we say, yeah, probably, or Poland or Italy or Ireland or whatever. And yes, so that's another route. But I think the key message is that there are more countries than you can imagine that will let you live there as long as you can afford it and as long as you promise to behave yourself. And that includes some of them, and that includes some of the most popular destinations in the Western Hemisphere: Costa Rica, Panama, all these countries that we've come to know and love will let you live there really without too much fuss and trouble, and they give you great benefits too. About the pensionado visa, for example, in Panama, it's great. You get big discounts, you get all kinds of things, and they don't distinguish between foreigners and locals. So what's not to like?
Right. One last question. We'll, open up to go to the questions people have put in the chat here. But what are a few of the sort of easiest and fastest places to go? If you had to just pick a couple that if someone thought, you know what, I want to do it soon, what do I do? Where do I look?
I mentioned two. I think Costa Rica and Panama in the Western Hemisphere are certainly very, very quick. They are geared to foreigners, expats. They have long been welcoming to North Americans in particular. And so those are two countries in the Western Hemisphere. There are others, but those are two that are very quick. In Europe, I think Portugal continues to be very attractive. It's slightly more expensive, but they are very welcoming of pensioners. Also of digital nomads. Greece is another one that's not difficult. The only difference between Europe and Central America and the Western Hemisphere is that Europe tends to be a little more bureaucratic, takes a little bit longer. You've got more bureaucrats to satisfy when you apply. And they also geopolitically are a little bit more cautious about who they let come and go, and it might be more expensive. But there right there are 5 countries. Every day, some other countries are announcing new programs. I mean, we're seeing them in Indonesia, in Malaysia, we're seeing them come up. Turkey's got a program, it's just really becoming a growth industry. And like I said, if you've got regular income and you're willing to spend it in their country, they'd love to have you.
Great. All right. Thank you for that. I want to open the floor here to our members who've tuned in for our live Q&A. So again, being able to ask questions is a benefit of International Living membership, and you can submit your question here in the chat below. So if you have not yet subscribed to International Living, now is the perfect time to join our community. So click the link in the description and subscribe today. So let's see, I've got a few questions queued up here. Once we are overseas for good, I think, Ted, this is probably going to be a question for you. What would be the pros and cons of canceling our U.S. citizenship? But we still want to get our Social Security. So can you just maybe speak to that idea? Like, can you hold dual citizenship? What are the advantages or disadvantages of renouncing your U.S. citizenship?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, yes, you can hold dual citizenship if you're, from the U.S. perspective. There are countries that don't allow dual citizens, but they are becoming fewer all the time. Countries are realizing it's important to change. Germany's in the process of changing at the moment. But I think the critical thing to consider when you expatriate is simply that you cease to be an American citizen and you no longer have the right to necessarily come and go as you please. Particularly if you have family here, that might be an issue. I've never heard of any legitimate expats who have decided to renounce their citizenship who've had trouble coming back to visit. But, you might need to apply for a visa. Just remember that you're no longer an American, that sort of thing. The big benefit is taxes. If you renounce your U.S. citizenship, and as long as you fall under, the right category in terms of wealth and income, you don't really owe an exit tax. It's only the very, very wealthy who end up getting hit with an exit tax, which is complicated and based on this idea that it's kind of like a wealth tax, really. But if you're just an ordinary person, I think it's maybe you've got a few $1 million in retirement savings, then it's not a problem. But the key thing is, don't forget that things do change, and just because you love the country you're in now, what if that country changes? Plan B's work in both directions. I'm keeping my U.S. passport, and it's simply because you never know what's going to happen. But the tax issue for some people is a big one. You can still get your any government benefits that you've earned while you're a U.S. Taxpayer. You can still get them overseas, even if you cease to be a citizen. That's set in stone. You can still receive your pension benefits that you earned while you're a U.S. citizen. So that's not a problem. You're not going to lose any of that. All you're going to lose is A, tax obligations, and B, the support of the United States diplomatically around the world. And whether that's worth it or not, that's an individual decision.
Right. Okay. Suzan, that's a question for you, I think, about Medicare. How does that work in broad strokes? Obviously, we can't get into the nitty-gritty, but in broad strokes, what do I need to know about Medicare before I move abroad?
Medicare is you technically you cannot use Medicare overseas except for within a certain distance of the US, etc. But with the new Advantage supplement plans and certain other supplement plans, you can use those overseas for urgent care or emergencies. And I know many people in Mexico and Costa Rica, especially, who have been able to use their Medicare supplemental or Advantage plan benefits for, a friend of mine had a broken leg in the Lake Chapala area of Mexico, for instance, and her Advantage plan paid all of her expenses. And she was a full-time expat. Another person I know elsewhere in Mexico had, an appendicitis emergency, and he had all of his benefits paid for by his Medicare supplement plan. I think it's a good thing to maintain when you move overseas, because as Ted said, you never know what will happen. And, the reason they're called expats and not immigrants is because most people who are going overseas, in my situation, for instance, as a retiree, eventually go back to the US when they get older and they need assisted living or need to be close to their family for medical issues. And then you will definitely want that Medicare. Now, not everybody does that, of course. Some people are, part of a national health program and are completely happy with where they're at. But in my opinion, Medicare is a great safety net. A lot of expats will get a medical evacuation policy to fly them back to the States if they have a sort of serious issue and get Medicare there. Of course, if you have a heart attack or something, you're not going to get on a plane and go back to the States. So you really need to do, some soul searching and research about what you want to do about your Medicare and your healthcare needs, your health insurance needs when you move overseas. I think we cannot stress how important that is. So, I mean, there are a lot of issues that you need to understand about that. But SEMA Hospital, for instance, in Costa Rica, I will say they have a division where they are working specifically with expats there who have Medicare Advantage plans. And I hope, we've been hearing for 20 years that Medicare will start covering expats overseas. It seems like that may help it happen, but it may not be soon enough for those of us who really want it to happen, if that makes sense.
Right. Okay. And let me say too that obviously we can't go into all of the details about Medicare here, but these are things that we cover in International Living Magazine, and we have books and reports that dive into all the details about that as well. And if you're a member, you can have access to those as well. I want to do one more question here for you, Ted. This person's interested in figuring out what would be the path for withdrawing from his nest egg. He's got a 401k, he's got a Roth IRA, a rollover IRA, some taxable mutual funds. Can you offer a broad-based, what do I need to think about strategy? I'm not sure you can, but what do people need to know before? What questions do they need to ask? Maybe that's the better question.
Right. Well, first of all, your retirement kitty, your nest egg is yours regardless of where you are in the world. And assuming you earned it in the United States, then it will always be subject to taxation in the United States. And usually countries like if you move to another country, then that other country will say, all right, well, the US is going to tax your retirement, when you take withdrawals, because that's the way that the international tax system works. But if the tax rate is higher in the other country that you live, you may also owe them a bit of extra tax as well. So if the US, for example, has a double taxation agreement like they do with all the popular expat destinations, when you take a withdrawal from your IRA or 401k, it's going to get taxed, assuming it's not a Roth, and by the IRS. And then if you owe any additional tax, then you'll have to pay that to your foreign country. Now, usually the difference is not very big, but it's something to think about, just to be aware of, because some people are shocked when they find out, that they're going to have to pay tax. But that's just the way it is. I mean, some countries have different tax rates, and usually they give really good benefits for those. And so I always say, well, remember what you're getting. That's where the healthcare comes from. The other thing to remember is that Roth IRAs are often treated, or any form of Roth, any sort of post-tax retirement vehicle is often treated as a regular savings vehicle by foreign governments and not as a privileged retirement account. And so if you get special benefits, like for example, if you live in certain parts of Italy on a regular pension, like or Social Security, then you can get a 7% flat tax rate if you live in the south of Italy. But that doesn't apply to Roths, because Roths are not considered under Italian law the same. And so you need to understand what the country's rules are regarding your particular mix of retirement savings. Then the other thing to remember is the question of required minimum distributions, because when you move to a cheaper country, you're going to say, I don't need to take all this money out, but IRS wants you to, so you got to do it, right? So you need to think about how you're going to handle that as well. That may involve setting up some sort of non-retirement investment accounts, to supplement your retirement with the money that you're withdrawing from your retirement. But essentially, it's like anything else in the world. You just need to be sure that you've thought ahead about what the implications are when you're in this new situation. And of course, that's where the information comes in. And that's part of what I do. I mean, people consult with me. We go through their thing, and I say, well, this is what you need to do. And then we hook them up with somebody who can help them.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Thank you both so much. I want to wrap up part one of our workshop here. And we are going to take a really short break, like 30, 60 seconds while we get everybody else on. So if you're tuning in here, you can stand up and stretch, and we will be right back in just a minute with the rest of our panel of expats. So don't go away. Suzan and Ted, thank you so much. I appreciate you joining me.
You're welcome.
It's a pleasure.
Hi, welcome back. I'm Jen Stevens, Executive Editor of International Living, and your host. So now we are going to hear some firsthand stories from people like you who took their curiosity about life abroad and have successfully relocated overseas. They're going to share their journeys and challenges, some of the benefits that they've experienced since moving abroad. And I hope that these real life stories will give you some inspiration and some insights as you consider your own move to another country. So joining me is a wonderful panel of expats. We've got Marsha Scarbrough in Madrid, Spain. Hi, Marsha. Glenda Cole in Portugal. Hi, Glenda.
Yeah.
There you are. Jim Santos, who is roving the world these days. Hi, Jim.
Yeah. Buenos dias.
Cepee Tabibian. I hope I've said that last name. I kept practicing, not sure I did it right.
You got it right, Jen.
Spain. All right. Hi, Cepee. Thanks for joining us. And Cindy Sheahan in Italy. Hi, Cindy.
Buongiorno.
Great. Thanks so much. Marsha, I'm going to start with you. Your move to Spain was influenced by significant financial challenges and what you saw as political changes. Can you share a little bit about your decision-making process and why Spain stood out to you as a good place to go?
Well, my decision-making process was that I lost everything in the housing crash of 2008. So I had invested in properties in Santa Fe, New Mexico, thinking this was going to grow my nest egg and I would be able to retire. And then the properties went, which were heavily leveraged anyway, and then they went upside down completely. I ended up going into foreclosure and bankruptcy. And then the nest egg was gone completely. And I realized I was going to have to live on my pensions somewhere. And that would not be the United States. That would not be possible. And I'm well traveled enough to know that there were places that I could live on my pensions. So I started I got, at the same time I was going bankrupt, I got a certificate to teach English as a second language. So I was in the summers at the Santa Fe University of Art and Design, I was teaching faculty from other universities. So then during the winter, when Santa Fe's way too cold, I was going to visit my former students in their countries looking for this place where I could afford to live and want to live. So I went through South America, Brazil, I know Mexico very well, you know, all of that. And then I went to visit one former student who lived in Spain, in Madrid, thinking it would be too expensive, but I wanted to visit him because we had struck up a friendship. So I went to Spain and it was like, wait a minute, it's not too expensive. And it's got everything I want. It's got great weather like Southern California, the sort of flora and architecture of the Southern California of my youth. This fantastic joie de vivre culture, highly social, great food, great wine. And the thing that really sold me was it's safe. It's safe. There's like almost no violent crime and great public transportation. So by the time I had spent 6 weeks traveling around Spain, I realized that I wanted to move there. So then I went and started to do the research and start the visa process. And I just, with my pensions, just squeaked in under on the non-lucrative visa of the amount of passive income you had. It was like exactly that much.
Right. Okay. And, you know, so you mentioned sort of safety and lower cost of living as key factors in your decision to move to Spain, but can you talk a little bit about how those those things are reflected in your day-to-day life? Like, what does that actually mean, practically speaking? What does your day-to-day life look like, and maybe how do you think that would be different if you were still in the States?
Well, I think like if I was in Los Angeles with the money I have now, I'd be one of the 75,000 unhoused people, because there'd be no way I would be able to, you know, have a place in Los Angeles on these pensions. So in Madrid, I have a studio apartment in central Madrid in the very nice area. And I have wonderful public transportation, so I can go everywhere in Madrid for nothing. I have a senior resident Metro card that takes me Metro bus and the urban trains for zero. So the whole expense of having a car and gasoline and all that is gone. So that is a, you know, huge savings. And then, you know, Madrid is very social. So it's like I have a lot of friends, and I, you know, in the evenings we have tapas and wine, or we go to, you know, a museum or a play or something like that. And I go to Zumba and Pilates, you know, I have classes and exercise, and then I walk everywhere. So I'm in way better shape. And,
Right.
you know, no complaints at all. I'm loving it.
One something that struck me when we've talked in the past is that you have lots of friends who are not your age. You have friends sort of a broad swath, and you talk a little bit about that, because I think that can be kind of unusual in the United States.
Well, I think so. And friends that are much younger than me, and the concept of the caballeros, like young men who it's not a romantic thing at all, but they like, because chivalry is not dead, they're like, I'm your caballero. That means I'm your champion. You need something, call me, you know, and they mean it. So, you know, that is very interesting. And also the great majority of my friends are Spanish. I have lived in an expat community in Mexico 20 years ago, and I kind of decided that expat community was not for me. I want to be in the actual culture, in the actual mix of it. So I have, you know, professional women friends. I have all kinds of young friends. For many years in the US, I did ecstatic dance. If people know what that is, it comes from Roth 5 rhythms, and it's a sort of dance therapy. It's huge here. You can go every week. So I have a lot of younger friends that are from that ecstatic dances, sort of hippie-ish woo-woo community. And they're, you know, they're very serious about community and connection. And I feel almost more connected here, partly because of it's more manageable transportation wise. People, it's easier for people to meet without the whole car parking, having to drive miles on the freeway.
Right.
So, and I love being in the
Nice.
city. I've always been a city person, and I've kind of always known that, you know, so.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. Cepee, I want to go to you next because you also are in Spain. You started out in Madrid. Let's talk about that really quickly, and then I want to find out more about where you are now. But what about Madrid specifically appealed to you? Why there when you had all of Spain to consider, all of the world to consider, maybe?
Right. I think Marsha just hit it on the head there. Pretty much the same reasons why. And I first went to Madrid at a very different stage of life. So I'm now in my 40s, but Madrid pulled me in when I was in my early 20s. And I just also am a city girl. And it was that magical city that had so much energy and vibrancy to it that it was like love at first sight. Right. As Marsha said, it is a super social city. So to me, it really is the city that never sleeps. There's something going on at all hours of the day and night. And it's a city, and I think Spain in general, but it's amplified in Madrid. You will see that people of all ages are out at all hours. I would love just strolling in Madrid at 11:30 p.m. at night, and you will see, you know, people in their 20s, 30s, but then you're going to see the abuelas in their 80s and 90s walking around with the grandchildren who are 4 and 5 years old. And so it's a city that you never really feel alone, and you're constantly feeding off that energy. As someone in my 20s, I was very much interested in the nightlife, the bars, being out late. And even when I moved to Spain back and forth many times to Madrid, most recently in my 30s. And I was also craving that energy of being able to have a social life at night and not being the only. Before I used to live in Austin, Texas, and going out even in my 30s, which sounds so young now, but at the time I felt a little bit like the oldest person in the room when I would go out. So just being able to go out and see plenty of people my age and older that were really enjoying their life, because, you know, you don't have to stop enjoying your life at a certain age. So I think all of that, what Marsha said, the safety is another huge factor that drew me there. And then I think in particular, Madrid is a city that often was getting overlooked in Spain. And so it's maintained its authenticity. It's not, doesn't have that amusement park feeling of like a Barcelona. The coast of Spain is very oversaturated with tourism and expats, but Madrid has maintained its authentic identity, although I think that may be changing in the future. I think the secret's out.
Well, you're not in Madrid anymore. You're now down in Malaga. So talk a little bit about that. You can walk to the beach in 8 minutes from your place. So why Malaga? Maybe it's the beach.
Yeah, it is a big change. And yes, it is beautiful to have that sea view right from my balcony. I am not a beach girl. Like I said, I'm a city girl. But during the pandemic, we had a very harsh lockdown, like many places, but in Spain, it was particularly harsh. And so it was the first time after living in Madrid for so long that I thought, let me change things up, right? And a lot of my friends were going to the coast. One, because, you know, you can afford more at the time. You could have a bigger apartment, more space, but you also have that access to nature, the sea and the mountains. And so, yeah, in 2020, I changed things up and was just going to go temporarily for 6 months and then move back to Madrid. It really just like was a temporary change, but here I am almost 4 years later and I still haven't left. So it's been a wonderful change. And I think it's definitely a different pace of life. So for anyone who's looking for that slower pace of life, but still wants to have access to the international world, but have also a very authentic city, I think Malaga is a wonderful place to live. But if you are allergic to the heat and humidity, maybe it's not the best place for you.
Right. Okay. Can you talk a little bit about the community that you started? It's called She Hit Refresh, and what inspired you to create that space for women over 30 who are interested in moving abroad?
Yes, thanks so much for asking about it. Yeah, so I started She Hit Refresh, which is my company that teaches women over 30 how to move abroad. And it really came from my own experience. So as I mentioned, I'd moved back and forth to Spain quite a few times, but it was at 35 that I thought, let me try once again and make this work. Those previous times, I just always had to move back to the US because I couldn't find a way other than teaching English to stay. And that's not what I wanted to do. So when I moved at 35, I'm now 44, but when I moved at 35, I just had a lot of peers, friends, and people in my network in the US asking me not only how I did it, but, was I too old to be doing this? Was I scared? What about my career? Asking all these questions that were really coming from a place of fear. And I had met so many incredible women in Madrid who had done it. And so just kind of put these two groups in a Facebook group to see how they could help each other. And from there, it took off. And since then, I've been helping women who are kind of the in-betweeners, I like to call them. So they're not women who are taking a gap year or fresh out of college, but they're not women who are at the point in their life where they're retiring and they may not have as many tethers as someone in between who is juggling, how they're going to maintain their career. Maybe they have a house, a mortgage, a student debt. So how to do that with those tethers and do it in a way that will work, right? And so it's been a really fun ride, 7 years now of helping women understand how to do that, because not only is it that aspect, but it's all those fears and limiting beliefs that we help them work through of, is it too late? Am I too old? What if it doesn't work out? What if I fail? All of that together.
Right. Thank you so much for joining me. Glenda, I want to go to you next. What initially sparked your interest in retiring abroad, and how did you go about researching the potential destinations? You are in Portugal, just to give people a frame of reference there. So talk a little bit about how you ended up there.
All right. So I honestly, I was an insane, stressed, busy executive, working a zillion hours, as many of us have, and sleeping maybe 4 or 5 hours a night. And I actually had an intervention. My friends had an intervention with me when we were on one of our fleeting vacations in Croatia. I'll never forget it. We were having wine by the side of a pool, and my friends turned to me and said, "The job is killing you. What are you going to do?" And I went, "I love my job." And they said, "We know that, but it's killing you." So I did something similar to what Susan was talking about. I wrote a marketing plan for my life. And at the end of all of my spreadsheets and action plans and strategy, it came out, no, I want to experience living the way I've been vacationing. And how can I do that? So I started, of course, the answer was international living. I started reading the publication years ago. And about 5 years before I thought I could afford to retire, I happened to be on a incredibly excruciating long plane ride. And that month I had tucked away my international magazine, my pleasure to read on those log flights. And it happened to be that global index issue. And I spent that entire 7 hours doing spreadsheets, doing my own weighted variables, and 5 countries appeared miraculously as the places that maybe I could think about retiring to.
Great. Now, you ultimately ended up on the Algarve in Portugal. What aspects of life there appealed to you most, and how, what made this the place for you?
So at an annual visit to many countries, Malta, south of Spain, Panama, I hit the Algarve, and everything the magazine said about it was true, but beyond my wildest dreams, right? Of course, it's the exquisite weather. I'm looking out at the ocean right now, and it looks stunning. I saw a cruise ship yesterday out there. I'm on a golf course. All of that is tied to cost of living. I did a spreadsheet. I'm a spreadsheet nerd on cost of living in all of those places. And I realized that I could sort of live like a queen here. I have a beautiful villa on a golf course with this ocean view. And every day I wake up to beauty. And it's the natural beauty around me. I'm not a city person, but I do have a city close by. City when I say Lagos, but I can also be in Lisbon, which I will be on Thursday, for a beautiful weekend. So it is the weather, it is the beauty, the natural beauty. It is the people are so welcoming. It is the fact that sadly I can speak English every day as much as I love language. It is very easy to move here, and it is easier to make. I was talking about this yesterday to friends. I've had a lot of visitors, and they said, I think it's easy for you to make friends, and I make friends everywhere. Obviously, I'm very, very outgoing, but I made more friends here than I made in the US because it's just so easy and so much fun. You can do as little every day as you want, or you can just lay out by the pool every day. It's a beautiful life.
Very nice. I'm gonna leave it there with "It's a Beautiful Life" because that sounds pretty compelling. Cindy, I want to turn to you because I want to make sure we leave time for people's questions. So, you initially chose Portugal. Also, you were in Porto, but what drew you to Portugal? Let's talk about that first, and then we'll tell people where you are now.
Sure. I had been traveling the world for a couple of years and was really starting to get intrigued about the idea of living somewhere not in the US. And when I started looking into it, the one that jumped out at me, the country that seemed the cheapest, the quickest, the easiest to get into was Portugal. So I applied for the D7 visa in June, and I was living there in October. So it was really a slam dunk, and it was really a nice way to just kind of land and get there. And I had no problem with Portugal. I loved it. I was living in Porto. Like Glenda said, it's easy to make friends overseas. I don't know why. I think everybody's just kind of more open, and there's not a lot of restrictions of, oh, you don't live here, and oh, where did you grow up? Everybody's just kind of on equal footing, and I love that. While I was in Portugal, I learned that if I wanted to, let me back up a second. So before I got to Portugal, I had been trying to apply for my Italian citizenship recognition through Ancestry. And during the pandemic, when everybody had time on their hands, I was researching that. And it wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be quick. And it wasn't going to happen for years if I had gone about it that way. So I kind of shelved all that, put it aside, grabbed the Portugal thing, and got on a plane and left. While I was in Portugal, I found out that if I moved to Italy and applied in Italy, I could have my passport in my hand in 6 months. So,
no way, really?
Yep. In Portugal, it was going to be 5 years of residency and then 2 years to get your passport approved. And so, I'm not getting any younger. So I thought, okay, that's kind of, I'm on a quicker timeline here, guys. So when I realized that I could move to Italy and apply from living there, there was no question in my mind. I sold my furniture in Porto. I said goodbye to the awesome people that I had met there, and I got myself over here to Italy. I submitted all my paperwork on February 4th, and I should be approved any day now. And really, I would have been approved. Don't even ask. I forgot one document back at home in Denver and have to get that sent to me. So other than that, I would have been approved by now. And what are we in middle of May?
Yeah, wow.
Once I get my citizenship, then I can go ahead and apply for my passport.
Wow, that is fabulous. And where are you in Italy, and how are you enjoying it?
I am in Umbria, and the reason I am here is because I'm working with a service provider. Like you guys all said, I'm kind of a big city girl, and this has been a real change. I'm living in this tiny little medieval hilltop village with 5,000 people and not a lot to do. And the public transportation here is not great. Everybody has a car except me. So I'm enjoying it. I mean, it's beautiful. I'm in the hills, and it's a really beautiful area. And I will be here during this process. After that, I will be changing.
Right. Okay.
I'm going to head to
think you'll
Sicily.
Okay. I was going to say, will you stay in
I'm
Italy
totally
for a while?
staying in Italy.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. Thank you for sharing that. Do you have any specific advice for folks who would consider doing what you're doing and pursuing a passport through Ancestry? Is there one or two things you'd let them know ahead of time before they get their process started?
Yeah, I would say do it sooner rather than later. As we've seen the golden visas disappear in Spain and in Portugal. They have changed the tax regime in Portugal for new people coming in who weren't grandfathered in. Things are changing all the time. And I know here in Italy, they are talking about, and thankfully bureaucracy moves slowly, so it shouldn't happen anytime soon, but they're talking about limiting the amount of generations you can go back. So that's one thing. And they're also talking about requiring a language or having a language requirement, which thank goodness they don't have for me, because that might completely flaw for me. I'm working on it.
Right.
But that's not a requirement with the ancestry. And there's different ways to move to Italy without ancestry. There's visas, there's an elective residency visa, there's someone mentioned the 7% tax regime in the smaller towns where they're trying to draw people to the small villages and offering a good tax benefit for that. But I would say if you're thinking about it, get on it, because things aren't going to stay the same, as we've all seen.
Yeah.
You know, politics change. Whoever's in charge gets to make the rules. And, you know, if this is something you want to do, my advice would be get on it now.
Right. Okay. Cindy, thank you so much. Jim, I want to turn to you now. Jim has started out in his IL world with a different hat on than he's currently wearing, but I know you first as our International Living Ecuador correspondent because you were in Ecuador for many years for us. Can you talk just briefly about your experience there and how, you know, what was life like there? Why Ecuador?
Sure, Jen. Happy to be here today too. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Oh, okay, great. You know, we first got attracted to Ecuador for the weather. We're very interested in just not being cold anymore. So we moved to the coast of Ecuador. Shortly after that, I became the coastal correspondent for International Living. So that took us up and down the coast and meeting people and seeing different locations. Then we got the crazy idea that we wanted to hike the Inca Trail. So since the Andes were right next to us there in Ecuador, we did a lot of practice hikes and practice trips to the interior of the country. And then a trip to Peru for the hike, and went to Uruguay, went to Buenos Aires. So I think the main thing that we got from it was the idea that you can live anywhere you want. And I've talked to people about this at international living conferences before. It seems like an incredibly daunting task when you're first thinking about moving out of the country. And I don't want to minimize the challenges, because there are challenges. But once you've done it after a year or two, you look back and you think, what was the big deal? What was I so worried about? You know, life goes on just about anywhere. And it's really interesting to see how much we really have in common with people in places that are just so diverse.
Yeah, and now you are roaming, if for lack of a better word.
Right.
You've sold your house in the U.S. again. You've gone back to the States for a little while, and now you've sold your house and you're on the road. What motivated you to take this path? Are you ultimately looking for a place to settle?
Well, when we first left Ecuador after about 6 years there, it was with the intention of setting up a home base in the U.S. So we have 4 kids and 9 grandchildren. So we knew that realistically we'd be going back and forth to the U.S. We got all set and ready to go. And unfortunately, that's when COVID interrupted our travel plans. So after, you know, this delay caused by COVID, we decided that, okay, now we can travel again. And we kind of overcompensated. We planned this big trip last fall into Eastern Europe. We were going to hit Greece and Turkey and Vienna and Prague, and going to go to Croatia and Barcelona and, you know, Portugal, work our way through all this. And unfortunately, somewhere between Istanbul and Vienna, we ironically contracted COVID and had to quarantine in a hotel in Prague. But rather than turn us off from that idea of travel, I think that clarified to us something that Suzan was talking about. You get to a certain point in your life and you don't know how much time you have left, or how much time you have left when you're healthy enough to travel and explore things. So for us, that was kind of the final push. We thought, you know, if we're going to do this, we need to do this now. So we looked at a lot of different options and decided that with the market conditions and things, it was best for us to just go ahead and put what we wanted to keep in storage, sell the house, let that sit and earn money while we go out and enjoy the world.
Nice. I like it. What factors, I guess, what are some of the things that you do when you are preparing for a trip? So you've been on a trip. I think you may be back in the States right now, but you were just in Panama for a while. What are you thinking about when you're trying to figure out where to go?
Actually, right now we're in San Miguel de Allende in central Mexico.
One of my
we'll be
favorite
back to the
cities in
States.
Mexico.
Oh, it is beautiful here. It's really nice, but unfortunately, we hit it during a record heat wave. So it's been in the 90s here during the day, but that's part of the fun, right? You know, it's kind of freeing. It's almost a random process. Sometimes we'll hear something about a place, like we happen to have some friends who live in San Miguel de Allende, people that we met through International Living, people who used to write for International Living. So that was a big reason we wanted to come here and check this area out. Now we're going back to the States for a little while to see family while kids are out of school. But then we're going to head to Europe and spend about 70 days motoring around Europe in a small RV, kind of a camper van. And that idea came because someone I was interviewing on a podcast, they did that. And we started thinking about that and thinking, hey, that's a great way to see the country. So we'll be picking up a RV in Berlin, Germany, and driving around anywhere from 8 to 10 countries until we head back to the International Living Conference in the end of October in Las Vegas. So it's a different kind of life, and it's surprisingly affordable once you take out that equation of where you're maintaining a home in the US.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense. Let's let you guys, we have a few minutes. I want to go to some questions. Here's one for, I don't know which one of you wants to answer this. How is inflation affecting Europe, in Spain in particular? Marsha, do you want to take this first, or?
Yeah, we're definitely feeling it, particularly in food, like the prices in the grocery stores. Some things have doubled and other things have gone up quite a bit, but they compensated. The Spanish government, for one thing, Spain uses less Russian oil than Germany and some other countries, so that didn't hit us so hard. But to compensate, that's why I have the free Metro Pass. They eliminated charging for a lot of the public transportation so that people would drive less and all that. So they then generally lower the cost of transportation to compensate for the rising cost of the food. And then in all the cities that are vital and popular, the rents are going up, kind of pushed by tourism and by inflation. So in Madrid, they're rising. In Malaga, I think is almost as much as Madrid now. And so,
Cepee, do you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, in Malaga alone, prices have gone up 20% in the last year. Many factors that, drive that, but I would probably say because, Spain and Portugal have always been cast as the affordable countries to move to in Europe. And I would say if you're moving to a major city, they're definitely not as affordable as they once were. And you're looking to pay over, if you want to live in a city center, definitely over €1,000 a month if you want to be in the center in a renovated, kind of place. So just factor that in. Those like basement bargain deals really aren't a thing anymore, unless if you're moving somewhere that isn't, I guess, the greatest hits of Europe. If you're looking to move to a smaller city, you can still find some good deals. Okay.
Cindy, I'm going to direct this at you, and I've just where did it go? I just lost. Oh, here it is. Here's my question. Sorry, these questions are scrolling. How is life leaving family behind? So you've got children. How is that working out for you?
It's tough. I have 4 kids. They're all adults now, and I actually have 2 grandbabies, so that's exciting. I will pay to fly them out here and hang out with me, and so I've had them here in January. A couple of them came out, and then one of my daughters came and actually stayed with me for a month and worked remotely, which was fun. And I'll be back in the States in July and August because I do not want to be in Europe in July and August with the hordes of people. So I will head back, and I have an apartment still in Denver that I keep and rent when I'm gone. So I'll go back and see everybody real quick and make the rounds. But, I don't want to go into too much, but I realize that when I'm back home, I don't even know where home is anymore, but when I'm back in Denver, they're busy. Yeah. They have lives, they have partners, they have jobs, they go camping, they go to festivals, they've got stuff to do. And when I'm home for those couple of months, we make a really concerted effort to get together and hang out. And I feel like it's more quality time. It might not be as much quantity as I would like, but I realize that when I am there for more than 2 or 3 months at a time, there's a lot of, oh, well, we'll get together next week, or, oh, sorry, we'll have to do that next time. And I see that when I am there on purpose, and we make solid plans to do stuff. And so I do make sure to see them when I'm back. So I usually go back during the summer, and then I usually head back at Christmas time or somewhere kind of around there, so I can avoid the high airfares, and, you know, get together with everybody. But it's been great to have them come to Portugal, they come to Italy, and we've done some fun trips that way. So I think they're pretty much okay with that.
I see Glenda nodding in agreement. I know, do you have a similar setup?
Yes, I mean, I have a son I'm super close to, and I totally agree with Cindy. You know, the quality time now, whereas before it was like, oh, I got lots to do, but you go back, I go back the month of August as well to escape the tourists, and I find interesting ways to lure him here, which I didn't know if it worked, but I used my residency number, and I scored Taylor Swift tickets, so he's coming this weekend, and we're going to the big concert with Swift in Lisbon. I am the ultimate mom.
Yeah, that's a pretty good points there. That's great. Let's see here. How important is it to have a U.S. mailing address? Some of you folks have kept an address, others have not. I know for banking and kind of technically speaking, you may need one. How do you guys handle that? Cepee, what do you do?
Yeah, I highly recommend keeping your US address. I have a virtual mailbox. So mine is located in Austin, Texas, and it's really great because I can manage everything online. I can see all my mail. I can have them, the service scan it, and I can see exactly what's inside. I can have them shred things, forward things. And that works much better, I think, than having to rely on family, friends to open things and scan it and get it to you. And you kind of feel like a little bit of a burden. So definitely recommend a virtual mailbox, and they're pretty cheap. You can get one for 10 to 15 bucks a month.
Anybody else have a different solution that they're currently using, or is that feels?
I have a bank.
I have a really good friend.
Cindy, go ahead. Cindy?
I have a good friend back in Colorado, and she grabs all my stuff for me, and it's amazing how little mail I get. I might get one piece of mail every 5 weeks. There's nothing. And so as long as I bring her back a good souvenir, she's happy to do that for me.
Gotcha. Okay. Let me see here. How expensive is private health insurance if you're over 65? This person is specifically asking about Spain, so maybe Marsha, you could just address that.
Well, it definitely goes up after, goes up as you age. And if you're over 74, some companies won't take you, but there is one called Atlantida that will take you up to 80. For me, I'm 77 and I'm paying 168 euros a month, which comes to about $200 that basically covers everything. I mean, there's some co-pays on things, but they're like 10 euros, but like, all the labs, all the MRIs, all the, everything you need is covered by that.
Okay. And Jim, what are you guys doing about health insurance in your roving phase here? Do you have a specific plan in place?
Well, like Susan said, I think it's a good idea to keep your U.S. health insurance, your Medicare, and that type of coverage, because you do never know what happens. We also, before we left, it's a good idea to get a complete checkup by your doctors, find out if any medications that you're on, if they're going to be available while you're traveling. And, we let our doctors know what we're doing and that we'll be stopping back in the States to see them at least once a year so we can keep our Medicare coverage and everything going. You have a wellness test you have to take at least once a year. While we're traveling, we found that really healthcare around the world is really pretty good. I mentioned we had to sequester in the hotel in Prague. We were both too sick to go out and find a doctor, but I found one online who came to the hotel with a nurse and with a little test kit. And they took swabs and samples and ran it. They said, yes, we not only had COVID, we also had 2 different bacterial infections. And I'm looking at you, Istanbul, by the way. But they provided us with all of the medication that we needed. They went out and got the Paxlovid and brought it back to us. And it was just a very good experience, very nice experience. My wife and I both had surgery while we were in Ecuador, and it was possibly a quarter of the cost of what it would have been in the US. And most of all, we find that we're treated as people. rather than potential insurance claims whenever we go to see a doctor.
Nice. And anybody else have any comments? Cepee, what do you do about health insurance?
Yeah, well, I can access the public health care in Spain. I particularly use the private health insurance. So for someone of my age, 44, I pay about maybe $60 a month. And like Marsha says, it covers everything. And I actually find that I go to the doctor a lot more in Spain than I did in the US. Not because I'm sick, but just because it's so easy, convenient. I know it's not going to be a headache. I'm not going to have to fight bills. They're not going to do things that I'm going to have to pay hundreds of dollars later. So I feel like I'm just more proactive about my health here because it's just so easy and not a headache.
Interesting. Well, you guys, I think we better wrap up here because we're running a little bit long, but thank you so much, all of you, for joining me and for sharing your stories and your insights. Super interesting. And I'm confident everyone listening in would agree with me. If you are tuning in and you have found the insights and experiences that our guests have shared to be valuable, as I have, remember that moving abroad is not just about escaping, but it's also about finding that better quality of life. So if you're interested in more content like this and answers to the many questions I unfortunately did not have time to get to, please subscribe to International Living. We'd love to hear your suggestions for future topics. Don't forget to join our new community forum and connect with the experts and fellow members and participate in our exclusive workshops and live Q&A. So all of you, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much, Jen.
Thanks. And
Pleasure.
for those of you tuning in, I will see you next time. Bye.
Ciao, ciao.